In the Vance mansion, music was not joy, it was air, it was food, and cruelly, it was the ruler used to measure a human being's worth. I still remember that day like it was burned into my skin. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, laying a funeral white blanket over the meticulously trimmed garden. Inside the massive living room, the fireplace was roaring, yet I felt cold all the way to the bone. The piano started. It was Chopin's Nocturne No. 2, played by Julian, my husband. His fingers glided across the glossy black Steinway with practiced brilliance, pulling out notes so clear and beautiful they could make people cry. But today, that music sounded like a knife carving straight through my chest. Mia, my daughter, was curled up in a shadowy corner behind the red velvet sofa. She was only 5, with big dark eyes like polished seeds, but those lips had never once formed the word Mom. Mia was born mute. In a family that had produced 3 generations of world-famous pianists and conductors like the Vances, Mia's silence wasn't just a disability. It was a crime, a stain that could never be washed off their glittering, gold-edged family name. When Julian ended the piece with a long, ringing chord, scattered applause followed. Not warm appreciation, but calculated clapping from the invited guests, music critics, and powerful promoters. Mia, maybe drawn by the vibrations, timidly stepped out of hiding. She wobbled toward the grand piano. Her small, pale hand reached out, wanting to touch those mesmerizing black and white keys. I held my breath, about to rush forward to stop her, but I was too late. Bang! The fallboard slammed down brutally, nearly crushing Mia's tiny fingers. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, my mother-in-law, stood there like a tower of ice. She had just used her baton to shove the lid down hard. "Don't let her filthy hands touch our sanctuary," she hissed. Not loud, but sharp enough for everyone in the room to hear. Mia flinched and stumbled back, eyes flooding with tears she couldn't even sob out loud. She opened her mouth and only managed a strangled little trapped in her throat. I lunged forward and scooped her up, shielding her against my chest. "Mom, Mia's just a child. She was only curious." "She is not curious, Clara." Eleanor looked at me with the contempt you reserve for an animal that won't obey. "She is an embarrassment. A Vance child who can't even hear a full note, can't solfège, can't even speak. She is defective." That word, defective, echoed in that luxurious room, brutal and naked. I looked up at Julian, praying he would say something to defend his own daughter. He was her father. But Julian didn't look at me. He was busy wiping invisible fingerprints off the keys Mia had almost touched. He sighed, bored and annoyed. "Clara, take her upstairs. You know Mom doesn't like noise, or this uncomfortable silence." My heart broke. Not because of my mother-in-law's cruelty, but because of my husband's cowardice. The man I once loved for his artistic sensitivity turned out to be nothing but a hollow puppet in his mother's hands. That night, after the guests left, I was summoned to the study. The air was thick with old oak and expensive cigarettes. Eleanor sat behind a massive desk. Julian stood by the window, staring out at the white curtain of snow, and another woman sat in the guest chair. Elise, a young classical vocalist rising fast. She was beautiful, polished, and most of all, she had a voice gifted by God. "Sit," Eleanor ordered without looking up. I didn't. I stood straight, Mia asleep and heavy on my shoulder. "Say what you need to say quickly. Mia has a low fever." "Tan. Good." Eleanor shoved a file toward the edge of the desk. "Sign." That paper again. Divorce papers. The 3rd time this year they'd put them in front of me, but this time something in their eyes was different. Determination. "I won't sign," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I did nothing wrong. I take care of this family. I support Julian's career." "You did nothing wrong." Elise cut in. But you also haven't done anything right. She stood, smoothed her flat stomach, and smiled with loaded meaning. Julian needs a wife who can stand on stage beside him, someone who can give birth to musical geniuses to inherit the Vance legacy, not a nanny and a disabled child. I froze, staring at Elise's stomach, then at Julian. You... My throat tightened. Julian, you... Julian finally turned around. For a second he looked guilty, then his face hardened into cold selfishness. Clara, be realistic. I'm about to go on a world tour. I need a partner. Elise? She understands my music. You only understand Bill's and Mia's medicine. And Mia? I shouted, tightening my hold on my sleeping child. She's your daughter. You're going to throw your own child away because she can't sing? She is not my child, Julian screamed, his face flushing red. A genius pianist cannot produce a deaf and mute child. She's your recessive gene. Your low-class blood ruined my artistic bloodline. That sentence hit like a slap from the sky. I stumbled back, my spine cracking against a cold bookshelf. So that was it. In his eyes, Mia wasn't a person. She was a defective product of genetics. Eleanor slammed her baton against the floor to end the performance. Enough. We don't have time for melodrama. Clara, the terms are simple. Sign and you'll get $20,000. Leave tonight. And remember this. She stood, walked closer, and leaned in so I could smell her heavy perfume. Change the girl's last name. Don't let her carry Vance. This family does not accept a grandchild who can't tell a C from a D. If anyone asks, say she died. Or say I never had a grandchild. Her cruelty made my skin crawl. But strangely, that absolute pain brought me a terrifying kind of clarity. I stared at the three people in front of me. An old woman with ambition bordering on madness, a cheap, spineless husband, and a shameless third party. They lived in silk. They played the holiest music. And yet their souls were rotten and uglier than anyone I'd ever met. I set Mia down on a chair and picked up the pen. $20,000. I laughed bitterly as tears ran down my face. Is that really the price of a human being? For you, it's a fortune, Elise sneered. I signed. My shaky handwriting tore through the page, tore through 5 years of youth and blind love. I'm not signing for the money. I threw the pen onto the desk. I'm signing because I refuse to let my daughter grow up in this filthy sanctuary. You think music is genetics? Class? Bloodline? No. Music is the soul. And you don't have one. Take the money and get out, Julian muttered, turning away, unable to meet my eyes. I lifted Mia. She'd woken up from the shouting, her eyes wide with fear. I grabbed my old coat and wrapped it around her. Come on, Mia, I whispered in her ear. I knew she couldn't hear my voice, but I believed she could feel my heartbeat. Let's go home. This isn't home. The mansion's huge doors opened. Snowy wind rushed in, icy and stinging my face, but that cold felt 1,000 times kinder than the suffocating air inside. I stepped outside. Snow had already piled up to my ankles. I had no car, nowhere to go right away, but I still walked, each heavy step stamping into the white. Behind me, the piano started again. Elise began to sing. An aria, high, perfect, technically flawless, carried by Julian's accompaniment. They were celebrating the stain being removed, celebrating the perfect dominant genes they believed were coming next. I stopped under the yellow street lamp by the gate. Mia looked up at me, her tiny hand lifted to wipe my tears. She lightly touched my throat, then my chest, where my heart was pounding. She smiled, a clean, dust-free smile. I took that small hand and kissed the fingers her grandmother had called filthy. They said you're defective, Mia, I told her in the quiet night. But they're wrong. You're not broken. Their world is just too loud to hear your voice. I looked back at the glowing mansion one last time. Just wait, Julian. Mrs. Vance. One day, I'll make you regret not recognizing the jewel you threw away. You worship music? Fine. My daughter will teach you what real music is. I turned away, holding Mia tight, and walked into the blizzard dark. The storm could freeze my body, but the fire of love for my child, and the rage in my chest, burned hotter than ever, warming my soul on the lonely road ahead. 3 years. Long enough to turn pain into scar tissue, and to turn a clumsy, sheltered woman like me into a hardened single mother. We rented a damp basement apartment in the city's East Side working-class district, where police sirens and drunk men's shouting replaced chamber symphonies. The $20,000 the Vances tossed at me had run out long ago, swallowed by Mia's endless medical bills and the apartment deposit. To survive, I worked 16 hours a day, mornings cleaning at a community cultural center, afternoons washing dishes at a fast food place, and nights sewing piecework at home. Hands Julian once praised as soft as silk were now rough, cracked, and thick with calluses. But every time I touched Mia's chubby cheek while she slept, those hands looked beautiful to me. At least they were earning an honest living to keep my angel alive, not floating over fake, spotless keys. Mia grew up inside her own silence, but she wasn't sad. If anything, she felt the world in a strange, heightened way. She liked pressing her ear against the wooden floor whenever a big truck rumbled by. She liked placing her palm on the face of an old radio speaker, even if she couldn't hear the song, just to feel the vibration. In her soundless world, everything was motion and rhythm. One late winter afternoon, heavy snow left the cultural center empty. I told Mia to sit quietly in the storage room while I mopped the main hall. The work was so exhausting, I lost track of time. When I finished the last steps, the building suddenly felt unnaturally still. Then I heard something. Ting, ting. Not chaotic noise. Notes. Scattered. Hesitant. But crystal clear. My heart jolted. An old Yamaha Grand sat in the main auditorium. Staff were forbidden to go in. The manager was a strict man. He'd threatened to fire me if I let my daughter run around. Mia! I called under my breath, dropping the mop and running toward the hall. Fear swallowed me whole. I was afraid she'd damage the piano, afraid I'd lose my job, afraid we'd starve through the winter. I pushed the heavy wooden door open. The sight froze me in place. The auditorium was dark, except for a thin strip of window light spilling onto the piano on stage. Mia, small and skinny in her worn sweater, was sitting on the bench. Her feet didn't even touch the floor, but her hands, they weren't smashing keys, they were gliding. Mia's eyes were shut, her head tilted slightly, her cheek pressed against the piano's wooden body. Her tiny fingers touched the keys with just the right force, so precise it was terrifying. What rang out wasn't a simple children's tune. It was a variation of the nocturne Julian used to play. But it was different. Not technically perfect, the rhythm slightly off, but it carried a deep sadness, a pure loneliness Julian's playing had never once held. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop a sob. How was this possible? Mia had severe congenital hearing loss. She had never studied music theory. She had never heard a full sound. How could she recreate that melody? The piece ended. Mia opened her eyes, saw me at the door, and jerked her hands away, bowing her head like a child caught committing a crime. I rushed forward, dropped to my knees beside the bench, and wrapped her in my arms. "It's okay, baby. It's okay, Mia," I cried, tears soaking her shoulder. "You played so beautifully. You scared me, but you played beautifully." "Hey, janitor, what do you think you're doing?" The manager's harsh voice exploded from the doorway, but before he could finish, another voice, older, stronger, cut him off. Quiet! From the dark corner of the balcony, a figure stepped out. Mr. Thomas, the cranky old security guard everyone ignored. He wore a worn-out coat and held a broom, but his eyes were blazing. Thomas climbed onto the stage and walked slowly toward us. He didn't look at me. He stared at Mia. "Child," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You don't hear with your ears, do you?" I held Mia tighter, wary. "Mr. Thomas, she can't hear, and she can't speak. Please don't tell the manager. I'll clean everything." "You fool!" Thomas snapped, but there was no cruelty in it. "Do you understand what you just witnessed? She doesn't hear with her ears. She hears with touch. She feels the strings' resonance travel through the wood, through the keys, straight into her bones." He sat beside Mia, put his calloused hand on the keyboard, and pressed a low note. "Do you feel it vibrate?" Mia looked at him, then nodded. "Genius," Thomas whispered, tears shining in the creases around his eyes. "I taught at the Royal Conservatory 40 years ago before these ears went bad and the world forgot me. I've searched my whole life for a soul this pure. God took her hearing so the world's garbage noise couldn't stain her." He turned to me, gripping my hand with urgency. "Girl, let me teach her. I won't take money. I'm begging you. Don't let this talent be buried in dishwater." From that day on, our lives changed. The Cultural Center's old storage room became a secret classroom. Every day after my shift, Thomas taught Mia how to control her finger pressure, how to feel rhythm through vibrations in the floor. Mia learned fast, frighteningly fast. She didn't need sheet music. She only needed to place her hands on the keys while Thomas played a sample, feel the vibration, and she could immediately play it back nearly perfectly, sometimes even adding her own emotional shading. Mia, the child the Vances called defective, was now making miracles on the keys. When she played, she wasn't a lonely mute child anymore. She glowed, her face bright like an angel speaking to God in a private language. 2 more years passed. Mia turned 7. Rumors about the masked angel began to spread through the city's underground music circles. Secret videos of a little girl in a bunny mask playing complex sonatas in the community center lobby hit social media, drawing hundreds of thousands of views. People obsessed over her identity, over the strange, instinctive technique in those tiny hands. I always made Mia wear a mask when she played. I was afraid. I was afraid the Vances would find out. On the other side of the city, Julian's career was spiraling. Failed tours, terrible album sales. Critics started calling his playing soulless and technically exhausted. Elise, his hot new singer-wife, got pulled into scandal after scandal. The Vance family was desperate for a comeback. And fate, cruel as it is, knows exactly how to arrange a collision. One night, while I was cleaning at an upscale restaurant, I saw Julian and his mother Eleanor on the TV mounted on the wall. They were holding a press conference to announce a competition. Vance Young Piano Talent Search, $50,000 prize, and a lifetime scholarship at the Vance Academy. "We are searching for an heir to the legacy," Eleanor said into the cameras, arrogant but unable to hide her anxiety. "A true genius to revive classical music." I went still. The rag slipped from my hand. $50,000. Exactly the amount she once threw in my face to buy my motherhood and my dignity 5 years ago. Only now it was a prize, and she was the judge. That night at home, I found Thomas sitting silently beside the old piano I'd just bought on installments for Mia. "Clara," he said, grave. "She's ready. This little pond can't hold a great fish anymore. She needs the ocean." "But you know who's running the biggest competition?" I said, my voice shaking. "The Vances. I can't take Mia into the wolf's den." "That's not a wolf's den." Thomas stood, eyes on fire. "That's her stage. Clara, are you going to hide her forever? Keep her a ghost playing in the shadows? She needs to be seen. And the best revenge isn't running, it's beating them at their own game." Mia was in the corner drawing. She drew a little girl standing on a big stage, a spotlight shining down, thunderous applause below. I looked at her, then at the entry form Thomas had already printed. They said my daughter was defective. They said my blood polluted their art. They were wrong. I picked up the pen and filled in the form. But under contestant name, I didn't write Mia Vance. I wrote, Mia Hope. Hope. Because that's what I renamed her after we left that house. We're entering, I told Thomas, my gaze steady. But Mia won't remove the mask until the final. I want them on their knees applauding her before they learn who she is. The Vance Young Piano Talent Competition attracted thousands of contestants from across the country. Under Thomas's guidance, Mia sailed through the preliminaries and the semifinals. The masked girl became a media phenomenon. People speculated endlessly about her mystery background, about the tiny hands that could move a room. On semifinal day 2, I brought Mia to the city's Grand Theater through the back entrance. My heart hammered when I saw huge posters of Julian Vance hanging everywhere. Mia held my hand tightly. She couldn't hear the buzzing crowd, couldn't hear the MC's voice, but she could feel my tension. She looked up and signed, using the sign language we learned together. Mom, are you scared? I smiled, shook my head, and signed back. I'm not scared. I'm proud. It was Mia's turn. She walked onto the stage in a simple white dress and a half-face mask. The audience gasped. On the judges' row, I saw Julian lazily twirling a pen, bored. Eleanor sat beside him, wearing reading glasses, staring at Mia's blank bio sheet. Mia sat at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys, and she began to play. Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically demanding pieces. Mia's fingers danced at a dizzying speed. The bell-like notes rang sharp and urgent, like a cry for the right to live, the right to be heard. Julian stopped twirling his pen. He sat up, eyes wide. Eleanor ripped off her glasses and leaned forward. They were professionals. They recognized the difference instantly. This wasn't the sound of a child trained like a machine in a conservatory. This was instinct, gift, something wild and pure the Vances had lost long ago. When the final note hit, the hall went silent for 3 seconds, then exploded into applause like thunder. Mia stood and bowed, awkward and sweet. Julian grabbed the microphone, his voice shaking with excitement. Contestant 108, your name is Mia Hope, right? Where did you study? Who is your teacher? I stood in the wings, barely breathing. Mia looked toward me, waiting. I nodded. Mia didn't answer, because she couldn't. She bowed again and sprinted off stage, leaving the judges in total shock. Stop that girl! Find her guardian! Now! Eleanor screamed into the mic, forgetting basic manners. She smelled genius, and her greed woke up again. I pulled Mia and ran out of the theater, diving into the waiting taxi. Mom, who is that man? Mia asked in signs as the car rolled away. She'd seen Julian's eyes, the hunger he had never once looked at her with at home. He's someone who forgot who you were, I told her, squeezing her tight. But soon, he won't be able to forget you again. My phone buzzed. A message from the organizers to the contact number I used, a burner SIM. Congratulations to Mia Hope for advancing to the final. The judges, especially Professor Eleanor Vance, would like to invite your family to a private dinner to discuss special sponsorship. I stared at the screen and felt my lips curl into a cold smile. The fish had taken the bait. They want to sponsor? They want to own this genius? Fine. But the price this time won't be money. It will be the Vance family's honor. I texted Thomas back. Mr. Thomas, prepare for the final. We're going to play that piece. The piece written for the deaf. The real battle was only beginning. And this time, I would not be the woman running into the snow. The Vance competition final was held at the Royal Opera House, the so-called cathedral of the elite. Crystal chandeliers threw dazzling light over expensive gowns and privileged faces, all waiting for the mysterious prodigy to appear. In the front row VIP section, Eleanor Vance sat upright, ambition shining openly in her eyes. Beside her, Julian looked restless. Elise, his singer wife, was absent. Rumors of a separation after her affair were splashed across the morning papers. Now the Vances had only one life raft left, the contestant known as Mia Hope. "Mom," Julian whispered, "if that girl signs an exclusive contract, our media group's stock will skyrocket." "Relax," Eleanor smirked, adjusting her diamond brooch. "No one refuses the Vance name and Vance money. That girl comes from nothing. She'll be grateful when we gift her our last name." The stage lights snapped off. A single spotlight pinned the Steinway Grand at center stage. Mia walked out. Tonight she wasn't in white. She wore a dress as red as flame, one I sewed myself over 3 sleepless nights. The bunny mask still covered half her face, revealing only tight-pressed lips and determined dark eyes. Mia sat at the bench. She didn't rush. She closed her eyes, placed a hand on the left side of her chest to feel her heartbeat, then slowly laid her fingers on the keys. The piece she chose wasn't empty technical showmanship. It was Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 31, Opera 110, written when the great composer was completely deaf. A scream of pain, desperation, and then a fierce rebirth from ashes. When the first note sounded, the entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Mia didn't hear the piano. She felt it. She leaned her forehead against the instrument's body, letting the vibration travel straight into her bones. Her playing wasn't smooth and polished like a conservatory student's. It was jagged, raw, yet packed with an emotional force that made the audience shiver. In the crowd, Julian began to tremble. He was an artist. Even if he'd lost his soul, he could still recognize this kind of music. This was what he'd craved his whole life and never touched. Because he was too cowardly, too calculating. Tears slid down Julian's cheeks. He turned to his mother. "Mom, this sound. Why does it feel familiar? It's like someone's crying. Someone I used to know." The sonata ended on a triumphant major chord, like a declaration of light defeating darkness. Mia lifted her hands, her chest rising and falling. For a moment, the opera house went silent, then erupted. Applause roared like thunder. The audience stood as one. Eleanor stood too, clapping the hardest, then hurried onto the stage with a microphone, her face glowing with victory. "Incredible! A true genius." Eleanor approached Mia, her voice booming through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the jewel the Vance Group has been searching for. Child, tell everyone. Do you agree to become my student, to become the heir of the Vance musical legacy?" Mia stood still, saying nothing. She looked at Eleanor with eyes as calm as a lake. "Child?" Eleanor's brow twitched as she forced her smile to stay in place. "You don't need to be afraid. Take off the mask and say yes." Mia slowly raised her hands, but she didn't remove the mask. She held her hands out in front of Eleanor and began to move. It was sign language. Eleanor froze. The crowd started whispering. "What is she doing? Is she mute?" From the wings, I stepped out. I wore my simple everyday clothes, no makeup, but my chin was up. I took the mic and positioned myself between Mia and Eleanor. "She says..." My voice rang out, clear, hard. "She doesn't need your legacy, because your legacy is for people who obey. Her music is for people who know how to listen with their hearts." "Clara!" Julian shot to his feet in the audience, his face drained of color. "Is that... you?" Eleanor stumbled back, staring at me, then at the child. Horror began to creep into her eyes. "No. What are you doing here? And that girl?" I turned to Mia and gave a small nod. Mia lifted her hands and removed the mask. A round little face, huge dark eyes, and a tiny beauty mark near her left eye gleamed under the spotlight. A shocked "oh" rippled through the crowd, but for the Vances, it was lightning striking. "Mia," Julian croaked, his knees buckling. He recognized his daughter, the child he once called a genetic defect, the child he threw out into a snowstorm 3 years ago. "Yes," I said, looking straight into the live broadcast camera. "This is Mia, the granddaughter Eleanor Vance once called a disgrace. The daughter the great pianist Julian Vance rejected because she was born deaf. She can't hear your applause, but she can feel your hypocrisy." "Cut the mic! Cut it now!" Eleanor screamed at the tech crew, her face twisted in rage and panic. But Thomas, my old friend, had already locked down the sound booth. "You're looking for a genius to save your dying reputation?" I continued, my voice thick with tears but full of steel. "You had one in your own home, but you threw her away. You tossed a diamond because it wasn't wrapped in velvet. Tonight, Mia isn't here to take your prize. She's here to prove this. A deaf child can create music more beautiful than people with perfect hearing but dead, deaf souls." I took Mia's hand. "Let's go, baby." "Wait, Clara, Mia." Julian ran onto the stage, tears streaming. He dropped to his knees in front of Mia, reaching for her hand. "I'm sorry. Mia, I'm your dad. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Come home. I'll give you everything." Mia looked at the man kneeling at her feet. She tilted her head. There was no hatred in her eyes, just no feeling at all. To Mia, he was only a loud stranger. She pulled her hand back and hid against me. "You don't have the right to touch her," I said, pushing Julian's hand away. "You lost that right on the night you chose your mistress and your career over your sick child. Your money, your fame, none of it means anything to us now. Clara, please. I regret it so much." Julian sobbed, pathetic and weak. Eleanor stood frozen, staring at the crowd as boos began to rise, as disgusted eyes threw contempt onto the stage. She knew it then. The Vance Empire was collapsing. Not from bankruptcy, but because their cruelty had been exposed under bright light. I led Mia down the stage steps, walking through an audience that parted for us like we were heroes. We left the glittering opera house behind, along with its fake spotlight and the people dying inside their too-late regret. Outside, snow fell again, but this time I didn't feel cold. A black car pulled up in front of us. The window rolled down to reveal the kind face of an elderly professor from the Paris Conservatory, someone who had quietly followed Mia through the viral videos. "Little one," he said in French, then switched to broken English. "I don't care what your last name is. I only care about your hands. Do you want to come to Paris? There you don't need to hear, only to feel." I looked at Mia. She looked at me, then at the professor. She smiled and nodded. I lifted my eyes to the night sky. Julian and Eleanor would live the rest of their lives in torment and public rejection. That was the cruelest revenge, making them watch the defect they discarded become the brightest star in a sky they would never reach. I squeezed my daughter's hand. "Come on, Mia. The world is waiting for you." And in that deep, quiet night, I swear I could hear a new symphony rising, one made of freedom and happiness.